Hopefully everyone's had a chance to take care of what they need to take care of. And we are on item J2, the summer camp. I'm sorry, not J2, J3, the county athletic field item. We just had public comment. We had one that was questions only, and we had another gentleman who already spoke. There is no further public comment, correct, Jim? Correct. All right, that's correct. So what would you all like to do? We have a few options on the agenda item. Who wants to kick us off? I'll call on you, I really will. Commissioner Tobias, what are your thoughts, sir?
I've got thoughts on other ones. Why don't we punt this over to someone else? I think I've had,
Pick the victim.
Yeah, I've had a disproportionate amount of time.
I think option one's a good option. I think that we're having them make sure they're doing safe, they're being responsible with their children, and it's able to get the children back out. We are trying very hard to stick with, pardon?
We're on J3. We're going to revisit and recall J2 at the end of the meeting. I apologize.
Yeah. So we've been trying very hard to stay level with what the governor's doing, and I think that would do it, and it would just make sure that they are doing what they need to do. And from all the people I've been hearing from, they're very willing to make sure that they're keeping the children in this kind of safe situation.
So that sounded close enough to a motion. I'm going to treat it as such. I'll go ahead and second it. Any discussion on that? All in favor of the option that was identified by Commissioner Pritchett, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, ma'am. All right, so we've already done J4. We'll revisit J2 when that's ready. Let's go to public comment. I believe there are two here that I see. We've got Trevor Tizell from Merritt Island and then Christina Jackson from Cocoa. So let's hear from those two if we may. And thank you all for your patience.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you. I just wanted to speak on something that I saw earlier today in Florida today about the potential of moving emergency management operations over to the sheriff. And so I just wanted to come out, mostly because I know there's not a meeting next month. I realize this is in the preliminary study stages, but I would just like to offer that there are at least a few folks in the community who have very strong opinions against this proposal. My opposition is not because I think that Sheriff Ivey would do a bad job with the position. I just think it's a bad policy move. But I also think that, in particular, I don't know that Sheriff Ivey would be best for that kind of a role. We get a lot of talk about maybe this will help. We're in the middle of one of these where the whole concept is being challenged during a non-hurricane event. And so I agree with some of the official kind of statements that have been out there that that's probably not a good time to change up how we're doing the whole system. We say there's other counties that have this model. On any given day, our county has twice as many people. So I think that we also need to consider whether or not an official who has said that he won't talk with the largest, the most significant media outlet in our county, being a person to handle emergency management operations and what that, kind of might entail. Unfortunately, Sheriff Ivey is kind of a political polarizing figure between, the Facebook videos and the Washington, D.C. photo ops. And so we need this to remain a fairly nonpartisan position. So I would just offer that up. And I would also offer up that maybe the voters should be the ones to decide this. And whether that be maybe we go to a weak mayor or strong mayor system, I just think that there needs to be a little bit more involvement, probably from a vote of the electorate. So as we're getting into this discussion, I would just kind of offer that up for the record. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate your patience, sir. All right, Ms. Jackson from Cocoa, if we have her. I apologize for the long wait.
No, that's okay. I'm like him. I got the information. My comment is on Sheriff Ivey also. What worries me is it seems to be a consistent lack of communication between him and either the community or the taxpayers. When a critical need budget was requested, no line budget was given, no balanced budget was required of him to get the thing voted for. A lawsuit ensued, then he joined, it cost taxpayers more money. That worries me. He says there's an increase in the population, school safety. If he's already having trouble now balancing a budget with what he has, if we add another department into his department, how do we know about that balanced budget? I haven't heard them needing a critical needs so far, but what will happen if Sheriff Ivey takes over that? During his Facebook Live during the one hurricane, I didn't even know about that. I still don't know what Facebook Live thing he did, but his information contradicted the emergency department's information, and then that caused issues. So there's, again, lack of communication. We aren't receiving information, COVID information about prisoners or their tests, lack of information. When there was complaints, he didn't even inform other police departments. As a cordial thing, it went through a judge about his deputies having COVID-19. There's a lack of communication. And also, like he said, but he doesn't give information to at least Florida Today. I don't know if there's any others. And that's how I receive much of my information. I don't have time to go to 10 different newspapers. I find one, I read it, and that's the one I have. So it just worries me how often there's a lack of communication. It's kind of a consistent lack of communication. And with the emergency department, we need someone who can communicate with you, with others. And we need someone that you guys will take control over. It seems like Sheriff Ivey doesn't get much control here of being told, we need a line budget like other departments. We need a balanced budget before we do this. We're going to do a court case. And it's just it's very frustrating to see this, and then let's do more. I taught high school. If you were failing in your classes, you couldn't do sports because it was showing, look, you need to get control of your classes. That's more important than do something extra. So it seems like that here. Let's get balanced budgets. Let's get the communication improved. And then let's see about maybe that. But it worries me because I've been married 20 years. Communication's important. I understand. So.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate, whoop. Is that what we call a mic drop moment?
That's pretty cool. Let me get back in there. Is that all right? Is that good? Okay.
Thank you so much. And do we have any further public comment, Mr. Bate, that you're aware of, or Jim and the? No? All right, that's it as far as public comment is concerned. So if you'd like, we can either, Mary Ellen, we can address your item now or after board reports. What do you prefer? After? Okay, we'll do it after. So let's start up with board reports. Item L is Lima. Mr. Bate?
No report.
Ms. Bentley?
No report.
Commissioner Pritchett? I believe you have a report.
Yes.
All right.
I want to start out with, I was going to wait to do this till we came back after the break, and because it was going to get ready to start the budget season, but seeing that the director just quit, and I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to, we're going through a crisis right now, and I didn't want to really have a discussion because people already got a lot of things going on, but that kind of, I thought, sped up maybe the conversation with you guys. And what I thought I would like to do is ask you guys to open up a dialogue. And a couple years ago, the sheriff had approached me about maybe doing the EOC, and I've been just like, thinking about it. But after we've been through a few events, not that we haven't done the best we could do. I mean, I realize when there's no situations, you don't see any problems, but when we had hard situations, I think it brought up a lot of places to where we're lacking as a county in emergency management. And so what I thought, if we could talk about this, and the more I've thought about it the last few months, and I know this is something we're going to have to talk about for a while, but I've been thinking about it for a while. And in my head, I'm pretty strong with the direction of the sheriff taking over the emergency management as the director. And I want to hold this up because there's so many different things going around. I guess you guys have been talking about it too, because this ended up in the paper and everything, and I haven't hardly told anyone. But we would keep our positions, the Board of County Commission, excuse the drawing, but I just did it real
Commissioner, I
quick.
apologize for interjecting, but since it's not coming up well in the video, do you want
That
to
way?
kind of, maybe if you could just tell people what it says?
Okay, there's a little chart up here. I was always bad at these flow charts. Brevard County Commission's here, and right underneath it is the Emergency Management Operations Director, which was the director that just quit. And what we would be doing is replacing that with the sheriff, and he would be running the emergency management operation. And again, this is going to take some work, and we're going to have to send it to staff. I just want to find out where you guys were, and it would have been nice to pick up a phone and talk to you. But I thought this was worthy of a conversation at this point. I've had some conversations with the sheriff since then, and he's still very excited about the idea, and I am also. So what I would like to do, if you guys are open to the idea, that maybe we could direct staff to get with the sheriff and find out what this would look like and how it would work. And I thought it might be good for us to talk about it now because we're getting ready to enter into budget season. The sheriff, as he always says, is convinced he'll be able to cut the budget, and we'll see what he has. But he tells me that every time he brings a project, so we'll see. But honestly, he's done a great job with the animal control, and he's really been able to do this. He leads over 1,000 people, so I have no question in my heart that he couldn't do this. And as far as running an emergency management organization, I don't know who's more qualified than the sheriff. And honestly, I've heard those people talk before. Any business I had, if I could talk him into running my business, I would do it in a heartbeat. He has those abilities as far as management. So this would be the same as what we do. The Board of County Commission is still going to be over this. The sheriff would just take up this, I think, a place where we need a little bit more expertise as far as this. And I think he's got the capability of doing that. So commissioners, I was just wondering if we could have this conversation. And it's so funny how this got out so fast. I talked to Mr. Berman, and I also had phone calls from city managers. And so the cities were talking to me, so I called the sheriff. He said, well, that's funny, because he said he just got off the phone with Mr. McKnight, and he's wanting to meet with the cities and get some input too. So I think this would be a big community conversation, and we could figure out how all the numbers play. But I wanted to find out from you guys where you were on it, because the more that I've spent a little bit of time on this, in all fairness, but I wanted to see where you guys were to even see if it's worth the effort, if you guys have any kind of appetite for it.
Mr. Chair?
Please, Commissioner Tobias.
So just to be clear, you're interested in looking at the sheriff's participation in Chapter 125?
I don't know what 125 is for sure right there.
Based on your chart.
You
it's
have
the-
that all
the-
for me?
Yeah, the day-to-day,
Yeah.
the day-to-day
Thank you,
operations.
Commissioner, yeah.
Yeah, because there's
Maybe-
a couple functions at also 252, but 125, wonderful idea. I would sincerely support you in going forward at looking at the feasibility of the sheriff's powers under Chapter 125.
Okay.
I'll jump in the end. Anyone else? Commissioner Snardi?
I would just say that, of course, I'm supportive. I think, without going into the shortcomings of previous leadership within the department, I think, for the few years that I've been here, and I don't think it's a secret to anybody, I've been not very pleased with our messaging. I think that there's been some mixed messaging that's come out of the department, and I think we need somebody who's already not just proven that, he's a well-respected leader within the county. I think we need somebody that commands leadership, and that's one thing that we've not had. So I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not blaming any one individual or many. I just know that that's an area that we definitely, I don't think anybody would disagree in this room, that we definitely need. I need good messenger. I need someone that makes somebody in the community that makes our residents feel safe. And I want somebody that possesses that audience and that ability to talk to people and that ability to have that outreach. And I think the sheriff would do a fine job. So if possible, I definitely would be supportive. I've seen it in other communities, and I've done some digging into what's going on there, and it seems to work. So I don't see why it wouldn't work within our
Yes,
county.
ma'am. I actually found 8 other counties that do it,
Right.
and 3 of them are pretty big. They have over 300,000 population, so this isn't an abnormal thing, so.
And I read some of the concerns that the county had, based on that email that went out, and I just don't think that those concerns are valid.
Apples and oranges.
I think they're apples and oranges, and I think it's reaching, honestly, quite honestly. I know nobody likes to give up their little kingdom or their little control over it, but as long as, if we're at the top of that hierarchy, I don't see how And he's accountable as well. I mean, him being elected, he's also accountable to residents, so.
Where did you find some, what did you, wait, bleh, can't talk well. What did you just refer to? I didn't
Which
see
part?
anything.
Are you talking about the
Which
email, sir?
cities?
Yeah, an email, I guess? I didn't.
Yeah,
Like I
I
said,
got.
There was an
That's
email
on
from
that.
staff that just talked about some grants and stuff like that, but I mean, it works elsewhere. I know that they get grants already that they end up having to partner with the county on, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. And again, I think that we've been in long need of some leadership and some cohesiveness and some order, and that's not something we've had even through this last crisis. Even though this crisis is, you know, unprecedented, I mean, I want consistency and I need leadership, at least from my perspective. So if, for whatever reason, the board decides not to go that route, I'm still going to be screaming from my seat that we need leadership, because we've not had it, and that's all I'm going to say. So, I mean, I would be interested in obviously hearing from you, Commissioner Smith, but I want to hear from the sheriff to make sure this is something he wants to take on, because he also has to put up with all of us. So I want to hear what his ideas are.
God bless him.
Yeah, I want to hear what his ideas are for what he thinks he
So-
can bring.
What is your proposal?
Well, that you guys, if you're open to the idea, then we'll have him sit down with staff, and he said he's going to work with the city. And that, I think it's as easy as, well, it's not as easy, but there would be an interlocal agreement, and we would get everything all tightened up. Brevard County Commission will always be doing the things that we just made the changes as far as resolutions and ordinances for things that affect, but our sheriff is going to be the guy running emergency management, and I think we really need a champion in that position. You know, not that we haven't done the best we could, but I think it really showed us we don't have the ability to do this as adequately as I think our sheriff
So
could.
you want to come back in July and hear from staff, and then we'll make a decision if that's what we want to do?
Yes, I'm pretty sure I'm going to do it, but I'm sure they'll work through it. I've had a little more time than y'all have, and I know you hate last-minute things thrown on, but I thought if you guys were open to it, then they can go get discussions, figure out how it looks financially, and get the other shareholders in the county comfortable. I've spent a little time with him. I've spent a lot of time with him on the phone here lately, so thank you, ma'am. Sir.
Commissioner Smith, would you like to hear from Sheriff Ivy first, or do you want to chime in now?
No, I'm willing, yeah, I would love to hear what he has to
Sure.
say, but if we're looking to make some decisions in July with some more information, I'd certainly be in favor of that.
Sheriff, name and city of residence, sir?
Wayne Ivy, no, Mims, Florida, so thriving metropolis of Mims. To Commissioner Pritchett's suggestion, I think the best course of action at this point, and first of all, thank you for your confidence in our team to do this, but I think perhaps the best course of action is to ask staff to work with us. I'd also like to include City Manager Jim McKnight in that as a representation of our local partners here in the county, to work with us to look at a feasibility plan for this, to an implementation plan. If there are any obstacles, to look at the ability to resolve those obstacles and to move forward when the board comes back after their break. As Commissioner Pritchett said, looking at the piece of things that make Brevard County so successful, our emergency management is vital to that, and our team is ready for that challenge. We're certainly been a huge part of it throughout the years. And when you look at the emergency management as well as the EOC, the Brevard County Sheriff's Office is a big piece of that puzzle. So we would look forward to working with staff to come up with the not only looking at the feasibility of it, but an implementation plan as well.
All right, Sheriff, I'll chime in unless Commissioner Smith has something he wants to add.
No.
I'll just tell you, I think you know me to be a straight shooter, kind of
Yes,
like
sir.
yourself. I like the idea. I do like the idea that we're not voting on whether or not to actually put this in place today. I think that gives us enough time to do a little bit more due diligence. The one thing that was brought to my attention, unfortunately later than I had hoped, is an Attorney General's opinion from 2012 actually dealing with Brevard County and the Emergency Management Director position. It's AGO 2012-28. I actually sent it to Eden right at the start of the meeting because I got it not far prior. And essentially it deals with dual office holding and the treatment of the Emergency Management Director position as an office as opposed to employment. So what I can tell you is I'll support this tonight. I'd like to be able to support it in the future. But the biggest hurdle I think that has to be overcome is an explanation, even if it's from our legal.
The statute contemplates a county constitutional officer can be the emergency management director. So that overrides the AGO opinion.
Okay, that'll do it.
That was the 2012 from our county. It was Ms. Prosser who was the subject, correct?
I don't know if it was, well, 8 years ago, yeah, it would have been,
Yeah,
it would have
yes.
either been her first year or the last year of a
Right,
predecessor.
Right. So, yeah, we're aware of it, and we have contemplated that.
Okay, all right. Well, scratch the last part I said. I'll support this tonight.
All right, sir.
And I just have a question. Moving forward, I mean, I know that the strategy group we just put in place brought more cities into it. Can we just make sure that in those discussions that we have those city leaders there? Because I know that's probably what's going to be their fear, is that they're not going to have input, when in actuality, the policy changes that we made gave them more input. It just didn't give them a voting right, I guess. But I want to make sure that they still have input because.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. In fact, I reached out for Mr. McKnight today. I personally
Yeah.
reached out for him and asked him, would he, be a part of this, to be that voice for them.
And maybe Courtney Barker, too. I think she's got good insight on the
Yeah,
beach.
absolutely. This is our entire community, and one of the things that I learned a long time ago is the importance of partnerships. And so, when we have a critical incident, just like we're going through right now, and previous in our hurricanes and our fires and everything else, it's important for everybody to have a voice in that. So we would certainly welcome that discussion.
Yeah, and Sheriff, I just think, moving forward, if that's something that ends up coming to pass, that we do make a change along these lines, whoever the League of Cities or the County Managers Association ends up picking as their representative, and that's probably going to rotate from year to year. That might be the easiest way to do it, so it doesn't look like you're showing favoritism either to one district or one city over another.
Yeah, absolutely, yes, sir. And just to offer that and kind of to tie back into yours, Commissioner Zardi, one of the things that we already facilitate in dealing with our 911 system is the memorandum of understanding with each agency. We've already been facilitating that, going to each city within the county and getting that signed and working with them. So we'll continue in that regard to make sure that everybody has a seat at the table and everybody has a decision at the table.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes. How many city managers do we have currently on the policy board? We just changed it. Aren't there 5?
Well, Jim McKnight was the alternate with Scott Morgan as the primary, but now with the change, what do we have, Ms. Bentley?
You still have one, but you are working on getting a strategic group together. There are meetings going to be scheduled in June and July to create the concept for that, and then that'll come back to the board.
And I think there's great value in having that advisory group that's saying what's going on in each potential part of the county. In these times of crisis, having that input from all the players, if you will, is vital to us, so that we know what we need to do, where we need to shift resources, what local agency is needing resources, and we can borrow them from another agency or another component, whether it's shifting public works or whatever. So I think it's vital to have those players in that focus group and in that advisory commission.
So would you be adverse to having, we have Satellite Beach, Indian Harbor Beach, Melbourne, I don't know, whatever the amount is, 5 or 6 of them, as opposed to just one being Jim McKnight? Do you see, would that be?
My only hesitation would be just being able to work in an expeditious manner. We're talking about trying to get the information back to you within really a month. So I would say, having 1 or 2 of them as a voice for the rest of them would be most beneficial in the short time frame that we're trying to work in.
So
rather
you're
than trying to
thinking-
coordinate meetings with all of the different schedules and everything else.
So Courtney Barker from Satellite Beach and Jim McKnight from Cocoa Beach?
Courtney and Jim be fine with me, yes, sir.
What I would jump in and say, and again, just to avoid the appearance of some sort of favoritism, the city manager group, I believe, still has Scott Morgan from West Melbourne as their primary, with Jim McKnight as the alternate. So I don't know if it's cleaner to do it with those two if you want 2 involved,
Yeah,
just so we're not picking and choosing who we want or who we don't want.
Yeah, I know Jim's already expressed an interest in it, and it might be let him bring the second person to the table. Let them meet collectively. I know they have weekly phone calls and stuff. Let them pick who that second person is going to be and can be that voice.
And really, if the board's asking, then we could probably pick which one we think will work
Yeah, it's true, too.
most cohesively with you. The reason why I said Courtney is because I have a lot of respect for her, and I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm perfectly fine with that. So I'll work with, whomever we can bring to the table.
That's great. And also, I think what I also like about this is that, we've been sitting and waiting for grant funding for the EOC, for our new EOC. So I'm really excited about some of those relationships you have to try to get us those monies for the EOC, so.
I knew there was an alternate plan.
There
to
is,
this.
there's an alternate. Get us the EOC, the new EOC built.
All right, I don't know that we need a motion for this
Yeah.
unless staff really feels strongly that we do.
I'm excited. Can I make a motion?
If you want, go for it.
Thank you, Ms. Pritchett. Can staff do a feasibility study granting or looking at the possibility of granting the sheriff emergency management position under Chapter 125?
Second?
All right, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. And I'm sorry it's taken so long to get to
Oh,
you,
no,
sir.
No, and again, thank you for your confidence in our team to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, all. And
Just leave the dog, please.
I was going to say, I just want to thank,
asleep again.
yeah, I see Chief Deputy Doug Waller over there as well. Thank you as well for hanging out here. I'm sorry you had to deal with Lieutenant Simpkins and Deputy Schulmeyer as well, but we got what we got here. All right, let's see where we are. Anything further, Commissioner Pritchett, as to board reports? Commissioner Tobias? Commissioner Smith?
Yes, sir. I'll be brief.
Yes, sir.
As your representative on the CFX, we had our second budget meeting this morning, and I apologize, I had some pertinent information written down and I left that home. But
That happens.
I can come close. One of the studies that we received today with COVID, transportation in Central Florida, which doesn't really cover here, but in downtown Orlando and environments. On March 4th, they had roughly a 4% decrease in traffic on the roads. March 22nd, which was the zenith, it was 54%. So when you're driving around and you notice that there were fewer cars on the road, it wasn't your imagination, it was real. And in a place as crowded as the Orlando area, 54% was huge. April 25th, we started coming out of it, and the number was 22%. And today, it's around 11%. So traffic is increasing. And I also wanted to share with you that our budget, CFX budget, is roughly $165 million a year, and that's exactly what we have in reserve. So we're in pretty good shape going forward, regardless of what happens. But our MBM Smith, I think, is the auditor that has been doing these studies for us. And they project that we're still going to have a 1% to 3% growth in revenue for CFX this year. So we think that's optimistic, and we voted today to just keep a flat rather than the suggested increase. But I just thought you guys would be interested in that from the perspective of a professional auditor that's looking at, and I mean, this guy had charts, and how they came up with all these numbers was pretty impressive. But I just thought you guys would like to know about it and know what's going on with CFX.
Appreciate it, sir.
Commissioner Smith, thank you for filling that role. I know that's a lot of traveling, and Commissioner Barfield was the inaugural seat on that, so you've got some big shoes to fill, and you're certainly doing a very good job, representing us for the future of transportation. So thank you for doing that.
It's fun. You get to rub shoulders and swap lives with some pretty cool people.
Commissioner Isnardi?
Yes, I just have one thing.
Please.
I wanted to talk about meeting procedures on what we're doing, and I wanted to see, and maybe that's a question for Mr. Abate, or maybe it's a board decision or discussion, because our last meeting where we had all those speakers, we had like some elderly people that were waiting outside in the heat, and I know we're trying to follow CDC guidelines, but I know I got some calls about that, and I just want to make sure that we're consistent across the board, because we had city staff from other cities in our meeting that were allowed to sit in the meeting, and even though they were asked to come to speak on the item, we had other people here to speak on items, and they had to wait outside because they were due to speak. But anyway, I want to make sure that if we only have especially a handful of speakers, there's no reason why they can't come and speak here. They can still maintain social distancing. We'd probably save staff time downstairs and mulling with traffic and everything else down there. It may be easier to figure out early on that it's not going to be an issue.
And Mr. Abate, you know, on that front as well, I would say if we do need for some reason to keep folks outside, even if we have just folding chairs to put out, you know, I do share that concern in terms of having folks that are elderly and may not be able to stand. And I hate having meetings that go 3-4 hours, but it may happen at some point in time that it's not a 13-minute meeting.
But if you look at our meetings in past as well, even our commission meetings, I mean, we kind of sat in weird spots when we were in the commission chambers, but there could have been, everybody in that room, at least the people that were waiting, could have socially distanced within that room. There could have easily been 6 feet in between people if they would have sat. Maybe our goal should be blocking off chairs or sections if we're trying to be real sticklers about it, but I think that our commission chambers are probably big enough.
We will maximize the social distancing in the commission chambers and identify chairs, and I don't see why that would be a problem. Now, if we have several hundred people, that's a whole different story.
Yeah, that may be
but-
an easier way to go about than, you know, doing it here and then not letting anybody up.
The other concern that was expressed to me on that front was with respect to the display that was outside. It was great that they had that, but people also were congregating to a degree in front of the display, which is essentially, it's good and bad. It's counterproductive in the sense we have them doing something we don't want them doing, but we're also providing them with that access that I think we have to provide them. So I don't know if they can put an extra display out or 2 displays out or a bigger display that's visible from elsewhere. But I think ensuring that we have folks, I don't want to say as comfortable as humanly possible, but not having to stand for hours and able to see and hear it, whatever you can do on that front, I think would be appreciated by everyone.
And it was unusual. Last meeting, there was a lot of speakers and
Yeah.
stuff, so.
I think we had 30 maybe, or 30-something?
Yeah, it was kind of a lot. But, I mean, we probably could have put those 30 people in the chambers and had them all sit apart. I know that sounds strange, but at least they wouldn't have been waiting in the
Mr.
heat.
Denninghoff?
Commissioners, we had anywhere between 25 and 35 people in the boardroom during the entire meeting in the last board meeting, the entire time. Okay, so I personally went outside, sought out and found the more elderly and a couple of folks who I knew were handicapped or impaired in some sort of way, and accommodated them with bringing in some extra seating into the boardroom. We could probably get a little bit more, but nobody stood for hours outside. Nobody did.
And I apologize if my understanding of how it took place was at all incorrect, and it sounds from what you're
I'm
telling me
confident
it was.
that some people felt like they stood outside for hours because it was a long time.
I was just contacted by a lady who had like a knee issue, and her knee was like swollen twice its size because she said she had to wait outside for hours. So I can only go off of what people tell me.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, just for the record, we put as many people into the boardroom as we could socially distance. We ignored the 10 people and a limitation, and we socially distanced, and we made arrangements for when people got out of one seat to speak and then left the room, we could fill that area in a different seat, but right next to it, to where we wouldn't have to worry about sanitizing and all that sort of thing over and over and over again in the meeting. But we kept the room about as full as we could keep it, and then when I saw an issue out there, I went ahead and took care of as much of it as I could reasonably take care of. If anybody had come to me and said, hey, I've got a problem, I would have accommodated them. And a couple of people did, and I did accommodate them.
But then maybe the standard needs to be the same for all then, unless you're here like specifically as a necessity, like as a
Commissioner,
staff
I'm
member.
fine with keeping all speakers out of this room if that's what you want. I would apply that to the sheriff's office as well. They came up here. I didn't bring them up here. They just came. And I'm not being critical of them, but they
Right.
filled up the room.
But a
And
commissioner had asked him to come because he was on her agenda report. So, I mean, that may be a little bit different.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so there were some people that were allowed up, and the majority stayed downstairs. And for me, I'm happy to do whatever the board wants us to do. And I'm happy to accommodate it. But we maintained social distance, and we did keep that boardroom full.
And I'll just throw out there as well, that if folks want me to handle it differently, I'm happy to handle it differently. But my input to staff has been with respect to awards, resolutions, presentations, and with respect to anyone that any of the commissioners has asked to show up on a particular item, to have them up. Obviously, we're talking prior to this past meeting.
Right.
But I don't feel that that's set in stone anywhere, so if folks want to do things differently, I'm fine with that. But I appreciate, Mr. Denninghoff, that everything, it sounds like everything that was possible to do was done with respect to filling people inside before anyone was outside. Yeah, and if there's any ability to do that, certainly if folks need them, at least to allow them to request them if they're not out there. I just, again, and I agree with you, I think we may have some folks that feel like they were waiting hours that may not have been waiting quite as long as they felt. But all the same, I think it's just an inconvenient set of circumstances that I think anything we can do to ameliorate that or make people a little more comfortable would be appreciated by all.
Yeah.
Were they outside, or were they in the hallway?
There's essentially two groups of people. The ones that were in the boardroom that they had signed up, had indicated what they wanted to speak on, and we were regulating that. That creates a problem because if the board meeting order changes, then some people are in the boardroom waiting to speak because we brought them in thinking they were going to speak towards the beginning, and then they wound up waiting. But the other group was outside under the canopy area out here towards the reflecting pond. And so those folks were waiting. Some of them were there not to speak. They were there just to watch. And so we weren't arranging people who were there to watch to come inside. So probably the biggest thing that we could do to improve the situation would be to provide some sort of seating. And it's correct that when we have the one television or monitor to watch, they tend to make a semicircle around it that is closer than 6 feet and makes it difficult for anybody to get through because then you have to get closer than 6 feet to walk between them. So there is a problem there. So we could try to put, it probably isn't going to much matter how many we put out there, but if we put seats out, it might help. We do have marks out there on the floor, on the ground, to try to help them understand what 6 feet looks like on the ground. But and we were going around asking them to please, spread out a little bit, but they weren't listening real well.
How about putting chairs in the hallway? Keep them 6 feet apart, at least they're in air conditioning.
It's an idea.
We can do that, but it just we'd constantly have to be shushing them because they'll talk, and as the doors open, when the speakers are coming in and out, then you can hear that noise right over the microphone in the big room. And you've all experienced that before when both doors are, in the inner door and the outer door are open, that winds up happening. We can just keep shushing them. But you always want to be respectful to them. They're the citizens, and that's who we serve. So
I think Colonel Wallace can handle that function.
By shushing them, is that what you have them?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
it's a problem. People get together, they want to talk, and and we get that, and they want to talk about the topics that are going on. One of the problems in the inner area, in the foyer area, lobby, is the sound system isn't real strong out there, and the reason is if it is, then it makes noise inside the boardroom, and so that creates a problem for us. Out there outside, then we can have it be, in fact, I had people complaining that it was too loud the last time. Previously we got complaints that it wasn't loud enough, so so we've tried to accommodate it. We haven't put a lot of chairs outside. We did it the very first meeting we had after all of this started. And hardly anybody sat in them. They all preferred to stand up. And
I think that's a better problem to have, though, given the
I
complaints that
agree.
have come in.
I agree.
And I apologize if my understanding in terms of the situation was anything less than accurate. I apologize for that.
I can assure you that people felt like they were standing up an awfully long time, and some of them were, but it wasn't hours. And we had plenty of people that were sitting a lot longer than that in the chambers.
I appreciate it, sir. Anything further, Commissioner?
Nope, that's it.
All right, I'm going to pass on mine. Let's circle back to the item on the summer camps. So we're going back to Jay's and Juliet 2.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
I had Nate go work with Mr. Larry Wojciechowski. How'd I do?
Say that twice as fast.
Wojciechowski.
We just call him Larry.
And so he came back with the new numbers of doing that delta. So the price per child went from $257 a week, it reduced by $105 to $132 per week. So we just got a little bit of savings. Thank you, sir, for doing that. So you have the exact too?
Not a
I just ran it.
exact.
so. I'm not
Yeah.
exact, but if you guys trust me, I think I'm pretty close. I think we just shaved off almost
Yeah,
70,000.
Larry did the yeoman's work. We put him in the room and quizzed him and kind of came up with the he had the right numbers, but we made sure he had them. If you trust me on the math, I will tell you the one caveat is the camps of 48 apiece go down to 45, just the 1-to-9 ratio. That's how it works. If you have option one, the loss on the far right column of 133,000 reduces it down to $73,302,
Yeah.
which is 45% reduction. And then option three, which is all summer camps, that 297 goes down to 171,250, which is a 42% reduction. And that's after CARES, and we are looking that we would have 2 of the rec workers be billed to CARES because we'll reclassify them, make them eligible for CARES, and that accounts for the supplies being billed to CARES Act. That's how we came up with that loss number
crazy.
after CARES numbers.
Thank you.
So we need to lock
It's-
people in the
it's Larry.
closet with calculators more often.
There was a lot of us pounding on calculators. Jill was there, Larry, Nate, yeah, there was a lot of us, so that's.
Thank you.
And it's not perfect, Commissioners, that's the
No, I know it's
cost
close,
is
so,
we could
yeah.
do, so.
Thank you.
All right, before we hear from Mary Ellen, do you want to hear from Mary Ellen, or are you satisfied with what you've heard so far?
I'm curious on what you guys are, which options you want, so.
Can I ask some questions about those
Go ahead.
numbers?
I'm frightened,
Oh,
please.
no.
I apologize.
Enter the gauntlet,
I
sir.
just wanted to make sure I had the agenda. Yes.
Hope you brought a snack.
No, I took somebody else's agenda. Okay, yes.
So I'll start off with the assumption. Was the assumption that everyone paid full freight, or was the assumption more accurate and assumed a third or a 35%
Full freight.
discounted rate?
Full freight.
Okay.
We-
So in other words, that assumption is a bad assumption because we will not receive, or
Yeah.
has that?
Commissioner, we only worked on the expense side. Yeah, everyone pays the full freight, and we did the math on the expense side to bill back to CARES.
Okay, so to be clear, that $73,000 loss will be larger.
Yes.
Okay. How, you built on, you dealt with the expense side, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I asked Mary Ellen said 90%, am I wrong? 90% of the expense was manpower, it was labor?
Yeah, it's.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
so, sorry, how did you,
It was $25 per week per child, so you
Touching
multiply that by the number of kids times 8. And I think the greatest expense still, Commissioner, was the labor. I think the supplies were very little in this delta.
so
Yeah.
what,
If that
I'm
helps.
sorry, what did we just lost 20 or 30%. What did we get rid
All
of?
staffing. We got rid of that one extra care staff that we don't have to have, which we weren't getting enough reimbursement to cover anyways. So you have a 1 to 10 ratio now instead of a
So we
2 to
got,
8.
so,
We were spending extra money that really wasn't putting us ahead. It was more expensive.
So the ratio,
so can we do the north area that was mentioned?
yeah, the ratio is 1 to 9 because we're still staying to our groups of 10. We reduced the second counselor and added floaters, 2 floaters to assist with that. We didn't want to have
Not too deeply.
not children alone if they have to go to the bathroom and the counselor has to go with them. So we have 2 floaters that will be billed to CARES, and we reduce the counselors 1 to 9.
Pretty slick there, Rita.
Not
Pretty
always,
awesome.
but
So what's the board's pleasure on this?
Do we want
So-
to put this on the TV?
I don't think Tobias finished.
Oh, I
Yeah,
apologize.
so, sorry, I appreciate it. So there was a little more rearranging, and thank you for pointing that out, Commissioner Pritchett. Does the 33,000, you dealt with expenses, you did not deal with revenue.
Correct,
So I can add, the assumption was about 33,000 based on that, so I can add
correct.
33,000 to that. So option one still sees a loss of approximately 106,000, given your new numbers.
Provided that the same amount of people who had the neighborhood strategy area.
Correct, 106,000.
Correct.
And so that's a delta of 206,000 because last year, we had a positive revenue of 100,000.
Correct.
Okay, so this is not necessarily the panacea. It's still a loss of $200,000 as opposed to whatever we were expecting, 250 before this happened.
Correct.
Okay.
Assuming the 6 camps were open.
Absolutely. Just as we make policy decisions,
Yes, sir.
I want to be very clear
Yes, sir.
that this will be $250,000 less.
Yes, sir.
And just so we're clear, if it was a $100,000 profit last year, that's a $100,000 profit that we made off of the residents in Brevard County,
Yes, ma'am.
off of their fees that they
It's
paid the
one-
county?
It's one
with
of
their
the very-
government?
It's
Okay.
one of the very few programs that is
Just so we're
above
clear.
break even.
And we can, if we opt to go with one of these options where we actually help the people that we serve, if we go reevaluate this next year, this may look like a completely different picture.
I would assume this would, if we return to
Normal?
quote-unquote normal, I would assume this picture would look like it looked last year.
All right. And if for some reason that the enrollment's way down, what could happen is that these expenses will come down, correct?
Correct.
Because we won't need the staff.
Correct, but,
Okay.
and that was one of the bullet points that was here. We had minimum enrollments, we had,
Now, if we said yes to either one of these, how fast could we be up and running for summer camp? Because most
We-
summer camp starts June 1st, correct?
so we anticipate following board direction, June 15th.
So we're already 2 weeks late.
Actually, we checked with many other areas around us, and many of them are going, if they're going, on June 15th.
Because a lot of the ones I saw when I went to do some searching, so a lot of them start on June 1st. But, I mean, if some of the bigger programs are starting June 15th, I'm okay with that. So for me, I would go with option 3. And then I would want if the board wanted to go that route, I would want I guess, a report at the end of it, or a report midway through to see where we are. And I would also like staff to look at it to see if there's any other possibility based on what's coming through from other counties and municipalities on looking to see if anything else possibly is reimbursable with COVID funding, other than what we've already know for sure to be refundable. So that would be my suggestion.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
To be clear, option 3, best case scenario, 171,000, that's the new number. And again, that's the assumption that 100% full freight.
Yes.
Assuming that's not going to happen based on last year's numbers, the number I got from you was 77,400. So this is a $250,000 loss plus the $100,000 that we would, does, to your knowledge, are there any private daycares or private facilities in which parents have the ability to send their kids in Brevard County?
So we did check 3 camps, one in Titusville, Frontline, 115 a week. Cocoa Just for Kids, 90 days, $90 a week, and Melbourne Bears Hugs is 135 a week.
Those survive without government subsidies or Brevard County subsidies, to the best of your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge.
So one is equal price, where you charge 90, one charges 90? So, Commissioner Pritchett mentioned a while ago that I don't know that government should be doing the business that private enterprise is doing, and it sounds like private enterprise is doing it for the exact same price, except they've found a way to make money, and we found a way to potentially lose $250,000. So I'm not going to support option 1. I'm not going to support option 3 because we're taking business away from the private sector. And this time when people don't have jobs, I think the last thing government should do, we've shut down businesses. I'm not saying I'm in support or against that, but what I'm certainly against is us offering programs at a loss to taxpayers while there's private enterprises that are doing what we're doing for the exact same cost. I appreciate you identifying that, and if they were 5 times what we were paying, there's folks that don't have the means to do that. But you mentioned 3, one that was at the exact cost, one that was a few dollars more. So I don't know that it's in our best interest to go ahead and expend resources. You mentioned, can you be a little more tangible on this? And I didn't ask you this. You said there's some capital expenses that you'll probably have to put aside. What might those capital expenses?
So there is some equipment that we have not yet purchased in this year's budget. There are some lighting projects that we had on the books to replace lighting for Musco systems for sports teams. Those types of...
Little League teams, that type of?
Yes, sir. Soccer.
Okay, and the Little Leagues, the ones that came up to us, that there's no private enterprise that supplies those type fields that actually needs to come to us. You know, that's why we got that outpouring, is my understanding. I appreciate wanting to do this. Now is not the time to compete. We are competing directly against private enterprise, and we're doing it at the detriment of taxpayers, and we're doing it at the detriment of private industry. This is the last time. This is the absolute time that we should not be stepping in to compete. And so I think option 1 is terrible, and option 3 is just horrific. Thank you for all your work.
So Commissioner DeBayo, I'm just curious, do you know for a fact that we're hurting private daycares? Have they reached out to you, or do you have evidence of that?
Here's
Or
the
are you
deal.
just assuming
If we are providing a service that private enterprise is,
Right.
then we are directly taking away from.
But you would have to have evidence of
game.
that in order to make that statement.
I don't have to have evidence
You could
there.
easily, on the flip side, you could easily say that we are providing a service because people need to go back to work, because some of those private entities may not be open. So any way you spin this,
We have
or
3,
any way-
we have 3
Guys,
that are
let's-
open right now.
Let's cut the crosstalk. I promise I'll give
Sorry.
everyone the opportunity to
Okay.
respond. I give you my word on
But I just want to
that.
say that any way you spin this is going to be, you could say, I'm trying to provide a place where people can bring their kids to be looked after because they're going back to work, and businesses are finally opening up. But without evidence that we're hurting another small business, or without evidence that, because I've not gotten any emails or phone calls regarding daycares. I've heard people say they want to be open, but that's about it. I don't even know if those were from any daycares or not, because they were usually from people with cut hair and that sort of thing. But I'm more interested in people having the ability to go back to work. And I know that that's been a concern that's come across my office. So, I mean, you could easily, as far as talking about loss, criticize the county for profiting off of those same residents last year, which no one had a problem with on this board. So with that, I'm going to call the question, and I'm just going to ask for option 3, and if it doesn't pass, then I'll make a motion for option 1.
I am going to give Commissioner Tobias a chance to
Yeah,
respond, as I said I would. I don't think it's fair
I'd
to
like
do
to, Commissioner Smith has been sitting over there pensively. We have a business, here's the businessman on, my question would be is, you dealt with painting cars and had a successful business doing that. How would you feel if Brevard County started to paint cars in direct competition with your private enterprise at the exact same cost? I think that this is
Clearly
yeah.
not
There's
the same thing.
no evidence that we would be directly taking away, but it's the exact same. It's in my mind.
Clearly
I've
not.
never been a business
Guys,
owner.
please, with the crosstalk, I'd appreciate it. I know it's getting late.
Well, I obviously wouldn't be happy, and it's akin to me competing against other body shops that worked under the table. They bought or paid rent in a storage shed, and they'd cut my prices by whatever, and they probably, I'm sure they didn't pay sales tax to anybody. So they were cutting me every which way.
I can't imagine. Would it be worse if government was doing it to you?
Yeah.
And they were doing it a lot.
I just figured live and let live. If I did a better job, then I would get my share of the business. And if that guy could sleep at nighttime with a clear conscience, God bless him, because he needed God's blessings. But yeah, if government was competing against me and subsidizing somebody else being in business, that would be a big pill to swallow.
I'm going to throw it where I'm at with this because I've been kind of quiet for this one. I'm really between the two arguments on this, and my thought is I'll support it with the caveat that we do exercise that additional option that you had referenced earlier when we first discussed the item with respect to having folks essentially provide something saying they need that. So I would support it if we did it with that. That seems to be the closest to a middle ground that I can find. I don't think there's any right answer on this. But if someone wants to make a motion and.
So what are you suggesting?
So one of the options was essentially to get something, as I recall, from an employer saying that they need to make use of that.
I remember.
I would support this if we had that in there. I would not support this without, though. And I am vacillating between yes and no if I had to vote yes or no, but that's where I'm at right now.
Can I jump in?
Please.
Okay, real quick. Our daycare right now, we have a good daycare. It's at 45% capacity. And with that, the government is paying 100% for all first responders' kids to be there. So there's a lot of COVID funds going everywhere. I think with some of this, as I think what this kind of serves as locations in certain areas for children to not, kids are hanging out at home all day and they're going to get in trouble. And it's kind of good for them to have good, something to do in the summer, guys, just from, especially even the low-income areas where we're doing that, it's not a bad thing because this gets kids around some kind of structure. And as far as the public sector, I mean, I agree. I have some hangups with that. I still have more problems with what we did with the airport hangars than this. I think we should have got competitive rates with that if we're going to do it because we came in so far under the competitive number. Everybody's at the county and not visiting the public, and I just had to throw that out there. And we're not too far off the competitive, what they're offering out there. We're not so much below, I think, because right now you can't go anywhere with the kids. Almost every daycare, if I may, or after school care or summer care, it's kind of a dud because they have to hang out at the building. You got to find things to do. So I'm going to support this because on that other thought with this, I think even if you open more areas, they're not going to be flooded. You're still going to have people not able to work right now and those kinds of things. So I think you're just opening up more locations. And since we got it down to a cost per kid, I think that it's not maybe a bad idea to go ahead and get it out in more areas to help serve the community for people to be able to take their children. Because even where we are, the hardest part people have is trying to find a way to get the kids there. And so I'm going to support you.
Mr. Chair, I have another question.
Yes, sir, please.
So let me get this straight. If we have a single mom that has a child and she has to go to work, she doesn't have anybody to take care of the child, she can take the child to daycare and get 5 weeks or whatever it's going to be, a respite. How much are we asking her to pay for this? Because it's costing us $90 a child, is that correct?
It's costing them $90 a child.
Okay, so how much is it costing us?
I believe Commissioner Pritchett, did you?
I do have that
I
number
thought-
here somewhere.
We're going to have to lock someone in a room with a calculator again.
No, I've got it. Hold on, it's just somewhere in here.
So it's $90 per child unless you live in a neighborhood
Well,
strategy.
You're saying we're
area.
not making money on that, but you're telling
No,
me
sir.
that other,
I'm not telling you, our Parks and Rec director looked up other ones and found out people are doing this for the exact same price as what we're doing it for, except they're finding a way to turn a profit. We're finding a way, if we go with option 3, to lose
money.
not lose money, $250,000.
no, we're not, it's 150, you added 100 because we're not making the profit
No,
from
no,
last year.
no. This is a very good point. No, it's a real loss of $250,000. According to Ms. Donner, it was $297,000 of a loss that they rearranged stuff, great work on the fly. It went down to $171,250. Now what that assumes is that every participant pays the full freight of the $90, which is not true. Based on previous numbers, 35% get a reduced rate based on strategic areas of need, in which we give them a discount of 50%, which is $45. Now, if you factor that into option 3, that's an additional loss of $77,420 in revenue. So
Actually, sir, it would be the 33,000
No,
because
30
that's static.
The 30
171,000 plus the 33. So by my calculations, it's 204.
I thought that the 33 was on the 5 camps. Now we're dealing with 11 camps.
You don't, you have to be in the strategic area to qualify for the
Okay, so the
reduction.
5 camps are in the strategic area.
The six,
Okay.
the 6 camps,
So
yes, sir.
The 6 camps. I
Yes,
apologize.
so it's 204,000.
So it's 204. My bad. That's not the 100 we made, plus it's a loss of 204,000. If you wanted to add the 100 that we made before that went back in the parks, it would be 300. But when you discount that, it's only 204. I'm sorry, I misunderstood, so I pardon my $250,000
And Commissioner Lober, you're
loss.
saying you're okay with it as long as we get a letter of need from
Yes.
somebody?
That's where I'm at, yes, sir.
And will you repeat, please, and I'm sorry I didn't ask, will you repeat the organization that, the private enterprise that you mentioned that does it for the $90?
So the one that we found, just because we randomly called around, was there's a Cocoa, Florida, just for kids, is $90 per week.
If we're going to compete against them, we might as well mention their name a few times, because we're going to take away from their profits. We might as well help them
My
out.
question is, how come they can make a profit and stay in business and we have to take a big loss?
Government loses money. We are not in the business of making money.
All right, so let's get back to the item at hand. I'm sorry to be a little bit short with folks, but I think we're
I
kind of getting
understand.
late here.
Sorry, my
and-
bad. I apologize.
No, it's, everyone has their own style. I respect that, but.
Might ask one clarification. I'm not sure where it's going, but one of the things that we requested was that we had a minimum registration of 15 children per site. So I would like to, depending on where the board goes, ask for that consideration. So we're not opening a camp for 3 children or.
Makes sense.
Can we include that in the motion then?
I'm trying to figure out again. I'm sorry, we've been round and
Yeah.
around. What was the
I do,
motion
Commissioner.
stated? Commissioner Snarty?
And I'll just ask this next question real quick. If it's not open, that's the savings too, correct?
Correct,
And summer camp provides a different service than daycare?
correct.
Okay.
Very, very different. We don't fall under government regulations as stipulated by the state of Florida for summer camps and after-school care.
Whole slew of different activities, whole slew of what kids have
It's
experienced?
licensure is the
Right.
biggest difference and all that goes along with
Because many daycares
licensure.
get subsidies for meals and that kind of thing. I
I
mean, based on their population. They
A lot of them do.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
right.
So Commissioner Pritchett or Snarty, would you like to phrase the motion so that we know where?
Okay, I want to make a motion to adopt option 3. And with the caveat, you want there to be a need?
Right, a note from the employer indicating there's a need.
Okay.
And then also,
In
I
other
believe
words, that they're
Commissioner Smith.
employed, basically?
I think that's sufficient. What do y'all think?
It shows proof of employment, some sort of.
Right, when we
Yeah,
had the
that's fine.
campgrounds, we had a doctor's note, so that
Okay.
said they needed to come to the
Yeah, I
campgrounds.
think
All right.
that's fine.
And then obviously also with, we can just say it after, with you coming back and giving us a status report?
Absolutely, we'd be happy to.
Then I think Commissioner Smith's item with respect to the minimum of 15 kids per site in order to open it, I think that might be good as well.
Yes, of course.
There were a lot of other, we wanted you to consider, if at all possible, in the agenda item.
I think I just had a struggle with the ratio.
So we would be 6 to 11 years, ratio of 1 counselor to 9 children, mandatory temperature checks, and if you're above 104, not permitted. It goes into a few other things, no field trips, obviously, face masks for
I'm
staff
good. I'm
requirements.
good leaving that to
Yeah,
staff
I'm
if
fine
you are.
with what's in the staff report.
I'm good, other than I don't think I have as much of a struggle for children that were previously registered, because you could have a new 6-year-old, same family.
So we
So-
looked at the people who were previously registered to allow them perhaps a day prior to opening to the general public, and there were 46 previously registered in all of the camps.
That's not bad. Okay, so I'll go ahead and second the motion as it's been stated. Hopefully not, but any further discussion on the motion?
Right.
I'll go ahead and call the question. All in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
All right, so passes 3-2
all
with
that
Commissioners
work, you said
Tabaya
nay.
and Smith in the negative.
All that work
Thank you.
said nay.
Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. And I just want to recircle to make sure I'm not missing anything. I think that's it.
A lot of work.
Did we get through? I don't think I missed anything.
Nope.
All right, I'll go ahead and adjourn it at 7:45. Thank you all so much.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.